I wanted to kind of take a moment to kind of give you my take and really kind of really a federal government take on what resilience is. So if any of you are familiar with federal policy, we have Presidential Policy Directive 8, which talks about security and resilience, and Presidential Policy Directive 21, which actually put critical infrastructure under that national preparedness framework. And that Policy Directive 21 defined resilience, and I'm going to shorten it a little bit, but it was really the ability to adapt to changing conditions and to recover from disruptive events. Whatever the cause happens to be, whether it's a natural cause or man-made, that's really the definition of resilience. And over the course of the time that I've been working in this space, I've really started to think about things very differently. I started really focused on built infrastructure in buildings. But over time, that definition of resilience has really come to me to mean that it's about society. It's about our ability as a society to be able to adapt to changing conditions and to recover quickly when a disruptive event of some sort occurs. And that's supported by those systems that we build. Water systems, wastewater treatment, stormwater, electrical power. We've heard about the water energy nexus and those kinds of issues over the past couple of days. So it's really about society and about people. And we've heard a lot about the importance of people. Sustainability, and I've wrestled with how I think about the relationship between sustainability and resilience for the last decade. So I still don't have an answer. But I really think, based on what I've heard over the last day and a half, is that it's about stewardship of resources. And that actually is not only the resource of water, but it's also how we manage the assets that allow us to deliver those services that water affords. And so we heard in the Arcadis presentation about asset management and really intelligent asset management. I think that is a huge component of this. It's also about forward planning and being able to, think about what conditions will be in the future and make sure that we're making decisions now that position us to accommodate those changes that we're expecting, whether it's changes in the climate conditions where those facilities operate, or whether it's changes in demand, either up or down, but to be able to prepare for those. And it's also about understanding the importance of the revenue streams that make all of this possible. So with that as kind of introduction, I am going to step back and begin introducing our panelists this morning. We're very fortunate to have a very accomplished group of panelists with us. Jim Giannopoulos, Jim, raise your hand, is the Chief Executive Officer for the Americas with GHD Limited. So Jim is going to give us really kind of a global perspective, I think, on the issue of water. And then Ana Carolina Coelho-Moran from is the Resiliency Officer for the South Florida Water Management District. Carolina is going to give us more of that regional perspective. Grant Davis is with Sonoma County Water, again, talking about kind of that regional perspective of water. I'd really hoped that Steve Modermeyer from Collins Werman was going to be able to join us, but unfortunately notified me at the last minute this morning that he could not be here. Steve's been doing a lot of work on value engineering and trying to align stakeholder interests, and I really thought that given the conversation that we've had here at the conference, that would have been a very important insight. And then last, Prabhu Chandrasekaran from Stantec. Prabhu is in charge, or he's the sector leader for their digital water program. So thank you all for being here this morning. And Jim, I'm going to yield the microphone to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. How uplifting have the discussions been yesterday and today? I'm sure we're all like-minded here. We all want to make a difference. And So, Stephen introduced me as the CEO of GH's Americas business, but I suppose I used to be a water engineer. I started as straight out of university in GHD, my hometown in Melbourne, and I've had the privilege and honour to work in a number of different locations in Australia, Asia, and in North America. I suppose I'll share some personal stories and reflections before I talk about some global perspectives, particularly focused on the Australian experience with climate change, sustainability and resiliency. When I joined the industry in Australia in the early 90s, it was during a recession. There was a lot of reform. So the real focus was around optimisation of assets, maximising investments, getting biggest bang for your buck. And there was a lot of reform and a lot of focus on how do we drive efficiency, get the best outcomes for the community. A lot of traditional design and construction projects, a lot of studies, a lot of analysis. And for a young engineer, it was a great opportunity to feel like you're making a difference in the community. In the early 2000s, I had the opportunity to move to Thailand, to Bangkok, which was a great experience of work on some major wastewater collection and treatment projects. And we talk about water is life, and for those of you that have visited Southeast Asia, water is such an integral part of the community, families, life and the economy. And it was just so eye-opening for me to see the impacts of pollution and the government at the time really looking at different alternative delivery models, looking at design-build operations, looking at funding for multilateral agencies, looking at getting global expertise to deliver really positive outcomes for their community. So it was great to be part of that, but it gave me my reflection at the time is how can we do things differently? We've got I suppose an established proud society that's looking for help externally, bringing in expertise globally, and looking at different funding and models to make a difference. In 2004, I moved to Southern California and set up a US practice, and we had some great opportunities to work with clients around asset management. We talk about asset management and strategic asset management around how do you make risk-based decisions, look at the whole life cycle, understand the condition of your assets, but also how do you prioritise investment? There's a lot of unmet investment, there's limited funds, so how do you maximise and how do you get the biggest bang for your buck? I then returned to Australia during the Millennium Drought, 13 years of consecutive drought. And our firm had the opportunity to be owner's engineer for the largest desalination project at the time in the world. And again, there was this call to action, all of it, it was the whole ecosystem, all partners, whether it's private, public, were all focused on the city cannot run out of water. We talk about the cost of infrastructure was secondary, it was all about social and economic costs. So we, as a team, whether with government, with other stakeholders, we delivered the largest and most complex environmental approval in the state's history in record time. Looked at PPP, alternative delivery, and in parallel, it wasn't about one option, and I'll talk more about that. It was about multiple options. So whether it's desalination, whether it's pipelines, whether it's reuse, whether it's looking at how do you deliver assets to meet a challenge or a problem quickly. So again, different delivery models around alliances, collaborative partnerships, getting private industry, government, whether it be consultants, contractors, to work together, to share risk, to share knowledge, to build capacity in the workforce, and to share knowledge. So that was an amazing experience. And I suppose in terms of global perspectives, we've all talked about the impacts of climate change, and there was a great statistic from India about 86% of all natural disasters are water related. But what are some of the lessons that I'd like to share with you today about, particularly around the Australian experience, is planning ahead of the curve and not being reactive. The uncertainty surrounding our future conditions remains, and planning this in pace on a wide range of plausible options. So don't take options off the table. How can we invest in planning and design to be able to activate the options when they're required? Collaboration between private and public organisations and the broader community, alternative delivery models, conservation versus restrictions. There's been a fair bit of discussion around conservation. An example, in Sydney, the water consumption is reduced by 50% over the past 30 years. So it's really top of mind in the community to reduce water usage and also look at how do we reuse, regenerate and reduce. So the importance of circular economy is front of mind, and that's been a theme in this conference as well. And with climate change moving the goalposts so quickly, how can we look at not just once in a generation investments, but multiple investments that can move the needle progressively and can deal with whether it's the stresses we've talked about, whether it's urban population growth, whether it's climate, but also shocks, whether it be a cyber attack, pandemic, etc. And then how do we diversify for resiliency and flexibility rather than just efficiency? A lot of focus on efficiency, but flexibility and resiliency are key. And as all of us, how do we use great knowledge of all our organisations and governments to collaborate and find solutions that make sense? The issues and challenges are always local, but how can we learn from each other? And also the cost, as we've discussed today, isn't just about the infrastructure cost, but what's the social and economic cost? And I suppose it's been heartening to hear a lot of the conversations in a lot of our communities around how can we make a positive impact to our communities, and it's not just at the asset cost, but the whole cost of the whole ecosystem. Thank you.
Great. Jim, thank you very much. Carolina, I'll turn the mic to you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for the invitation to be here. Thank you, Steve, for moderating this panel. I work for South Florida Water Management District, also a water resources engineer, and I'm going to bring a little bit you to a little bit of the South Florida problems that we have here related to this topic on water. We as an agency, we manage a 70-year-old system, aging system, one of the most complex, largest in the US. We manage water with the purpose of ensuring flood protection, water supply, and a big mission related to ecosystem resilience, ecosystem restoration and resilience. So really very aligned with the topic of the One Water. We do that with not a lot of flexibility today. We operate the system in South Florida to allow business, us, communities to develop, business to occur in this land, but we need to maintain water levels high, especially during the dry season, so we can recharge our aquifers, prevent saltwater intrusion, and really maintain, allow for releases, water releases when needed in the system, but not too high that would impact our flood protection goals, our flood protection level of service. So this is the reality that we deal as an agency and really understand how those changing conditions will be impacting the way you operate the system, the way that we are planning to enhance the system and to build resiliency on the system. We also manage one of the largest databases in the state, water and climate database in the state. So what we are doing is looking very closely at this massive amount of data to understand where we are seeing trends, where are those conditions changing, how they are changing, how fast they are changing, to then bring those analyses to our planning, all our planning efforts. So we look at patterns, we look at trends, we look at changing conditions that will allow us to then incorporate into scenario planning efforts. We have been developing robust model to understand, to appropriately represent the system operations and understand where we see vulnerabilities. And we also have been coordinating very closely to understand how these models and the conclusions that we are getting is communicating with the models and the conclusions that are happening at the local level. And finally, with all those tools, data analysis, and scenario planning efforts, we have been building our resilience plan. We are in the second year of updating this planning effort, looking at where and where and how much is where are the most important infrastructure investments that we need in the region, who are the partners that we need to be collaborating to implement those projects, what are the funding alternatives, how to get prepared and ready to accelerate implementation of those projects, and how can we collaborate as a region to achieve common goals and common agenda with the purpose of One Water. So as an agency, we are really working we are very committed to understand how this innovative technology sustainability can help us achieve these goals now into the future. How can we plan for those changing conditions, and how can we collaborate as a region to understand those solutions and achieve the resiliency of our system. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant?
Anna, thank you for that, and Jim, thank you as well. I am the general manager of Sonoma County Water Agency based in California, about 40 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge, just to give you context. That's part of San Francisco Bay, and I can't help but bring that to this conference. When you fly in and see Biscayne Bay and the Everglades and the challenges that are being experienced here, I would say Sonoma County, much like Miami, is sort of the epicenter for climate change. So I want to bring that this morning. And the answer of what's the future of water, I'm going to take the page out of a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that they will say, it depends. It depends on us, it depends on future generations and what we do moving forward. But I have to say how impressed I am with the level of thoughtfulness that the firms that are helping to sponsor this conference are participating. What we heard this morning gives me great confidence that we can be more strategic, we can find aligned partners, and we can invest in prioritization, which is going to be required. Because one thing with One Water is it's many things to many different people, and we're going to have to prioritize where that integration takes place, where the federal, state, regional, and local leverage opportunities are, and that's going to be our task at hand. So that foundation, I'd like to share a couple stories. I go back to 2017, and Sonoma County in October, it's the fall, and we ended up with what was then California's largest wildfire. Unbelievable. I was then director of the Department of Water Resources, working to restore the Oroville Dam, tallest dam in California, and it had encountered a major spillway incident. It was well reported nationwide. And we got that thing rebuilt, but about that time, my hometown in Sonoma County was under fire. And we were talking about mass evacuations. I couldn't help but think about my staff back in Sonoma County. And during that time in October, we lost my staff. 11 homes were just gone. I would say it was post-traumatic stress, and in some ways, we're still been experiencing that. So that's what I'm bringing here, having to live through evacuations. After 2017, we had major flooding. We have the most flood-induced port of California. The Russian River system that I manage for water supply is one of the most flood-prone frassy systems in California. So we're dealing with extreme weather events is what I call our challenge. In California, not so much here, you're looking at valuable supplies of water, you have your own challenges. But in California, our challenges are called atmospheric rivers. And that's something I hope that you'll be hearing more about in years to come. These are the water vapor that comes in off the west into California at about half the elevation level for detection. And they stall out. And we need to find out whether these atmospheric rivers are going to stall out above our reservoirs or below. So I am currently co-managing 2 large reservoirs with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they are managing these for flood control purposes, while Sonoma Water manages for water supply. And the atmospheric rivers are the defining feature that cause the flooding in California, as well as the lack of atmospheric rivers lead to drought. And we're right now in the middle of a 3-year drought, and believe me, that's not fun. We've had Jennifer from New York talking yesterday about what the challenges are for decisions about delivering water supply when it's stressed. So multiple year droughts, we talked about the 13-year drought down in Australia. That was a defining moment for anyone in the water management community. These are issues that we have to get ahead of, be strategic and aligned. So Jennifer again mentioned this idea of forecast-informed reservoir operations, and I want to reiterate that because this is where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, from my point of view, has shown some great leadership. We had a gentleman yesterday from IWR in the Corps talk about solutions. Well, this is a new solution. This is one that requires mass amounts of satellite data, the ability to measure and monitor precipitation, to understand when these ARs are coming in, where they're going to land, and what the collateral implications are. We need advanced warning. We need advanced time for water management to vacate reservoirs when we see storms coming, and we need to hold on to our water and not release it if we don't have to. And that's our challenge. So across the West, I would say today, for a defining feature, count the San Francisco Bay Area, Sonoma County Water, as part of the partnership that you're building for One Water globally, and certainly in the US. Another theme that we are facing, that we've heard over and over again, is retention of staff and innovation and making sure we're handing off something in better condition than we found it. Unfortunately, I think that we're far from that. And we've got to work double time to end up in a situation where we're preparing the next generation for getting us out of this. And I just feel morally responsible for making sure that the staff that we have jobs, that they are feeling meaning, and they're contributing toward not just innovation, but solutions. And getting talent is going to be, and retaining talent is going to be one of those signature challenges for water managers like Anna and I. We are going to have to make sure that folks that are engineers and our maintenance folks are part of something that's contributing toward restoration and protection of our natural resources. So that theme is one in which I'm not going to be able to chain somebody to a desk and say, you must work here and don't go somewhere else. It's just the reverse. You have to say they can go anywhere they want. And they can choose the careers that they want and the place to work that they want, and they're doing that more frequently. What we have is innovation and opportunity, and making sure that the impact of individuals' careers actually show up, that they're proud of what they've done. And if you can do that inside water agencies and utilities, that's going to be your best motive to keep the bright innovation coming forward. So there's huge challenges that we've heard. One thing I just want to reiterate is I had Adele and June Lopez from Mona Nagel. Those are the Californians that are here to stand up with you here in the Eastern Seaboard. And I think that we will just build where you have like-minded, independent folks that want to lead the industry. And I know how much we count on folks. I wasn't going to do this, but Jacobs Engineering just had soon speak about this. They're helping us with a climate resiliency plan, a climate adaptation plan, to be able to look at all of those, the infrastructure that we're responsible for managing, which is flood control, water supply, sanitation, and energy. We have that under one roof, so that's the one singular thing that gives me hope is on a government's model where your decision makers are under one roof, whereas many of those challenges that are needing to be integrated can be with the same 5 people. But that's not the case. We're an anomaly in California. We need to be looking at ways to get government structures that can manage to a regional level and take advantage of leveraging opportunities from local and regional with state and federal. And that's one of the key ingredients that makes me hopeful. So thank you for letting me be here and be part of this panel, Steve.
Great. Thank you very much. Prabhu, I'll turn it to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve. It's hard to follow up with all of your points on this one. Maybe I'll begin with asking, we talked a lot about One Water, and a lot of us talked about water being an essential component of it. Just a quick question, one person might know this. How many of you know about a bucket bath? Bucket bath. Oh yeah, okay, a few people here. The reason why I asked you that question is, we talk a lot about value of water, not able to communicate that with the larger community. I grew up knowing what the value of water without really knowing that's the value of water. The bucket bath is basically, Hugh, if he's here, he and I were talking about it earlier, Hugh Sinclair. We grew up taking bath every day in less than 10 gallons, right? a bucket bath. You just pour a cup of water on yourself, put soap on it, and then take a shower. That's it. Usually, that's how it goes. We talk about water conservation here. We talk about boil water advisory, right? Boil water advisory was probably very common for us. We boiled our water almost every day because we didn't focus on maintaining your design capacities and be able to run your plants to resiliency where you are just flooded, where you are inundated with water, where you're losing your operations for a couple of days. So how can we design? And this is where probably innovation and technology can play a bigger role, because we talk about the reason behind the whole innovation and technology is about making better decisions, making better actions. That's what it fundamentally comes down to. Whether helping existing workforce or training the existing workforce, or making advanced decisions on how can I optimize my wastewater treatment plants. So we can definitely leverage a lot of the innovative technologies and solutions. I can talk about that a lot, but I think we've heard a lot about digital twins, AI, machine learning. But one thing I want to offer one comment there is, before getting too far away into focusing on a specific technology, from my experience, what I've found out is we need to understand the why. What business outcome that we are trying to achieve? Depending on the business outcome, you will have one or several solutions at your disposal. So let's focus on the business outcomes, whether that's going to be at the watershed level, or maybe at the plant level or a pump station level. So the fundamental thing is to focus on the why, the business outcomes. It could be as simple as helping the workforce be more safe, right? So let's focus on the business outcomes and see what solutions we can bring to the table. When we talk about solutions, it's not just technology solutions, but also improving your business models too. Improving your procurement. I've heard several times procurement being a biggest inhibitor for several utilities to advance their vision. So when we think of innovation and technology, let's think of business innovation, business model innovation, beyond just technology innovation. I think hopefully if we keep our minds open and be willing to imagine beyond what we are limited to, not focused on just the 5 years, but beyond, maybe 50 years, I think we'll have a better outlook of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I had a number of questions before this, the early part of the panel session. Some of the comments have caused me to come up with some different questions. So, one of the things that I heard in almost everyone's comments was the importance of flexibility. And Grant and I were having a conversation earlier before the panel session about some of the workforce challenges that utilities face, particularly with aging workers who have a certain way of doing things, and that leads them to not necessarily want to innovate. And so I'd like to kind of pose to the panel, because people are very important to giving us the opportunity to innovate and respond to the changes we're seeing. I'd like to get your thoughts on how we might overcome some of those barriers to encouraging innovation in the workforce, and kind of building in that flexibility that you as utility operators or the engineering companies really need to move this one water concept forward.
Okay, I guess they're giving me the hard mission to start answering this question. I'm happy to. So we have, so for me, we have a challenge. I'm giving the perspective from a regional agency that is trying to understand the regional system and trying to understand the local management of the system as well, and how can we coordinate together. So when we talk about innovation and the need for technology and bringing more innovative process, for me, is really like, how can we really understand as a whole, as in a coordinated approach, the ways that we can manage solution, and how can we bring and share data, resources, and tools. So when we look at what are the options that we have to innovate here, Can we manage data more transparently? Can we share data more efficiently? Can we all have a way of understanding what we are reading out of this data and apply to our individual processes, following a more consensus, following some initial understanding? So for me, one aspect of innovation is this: how can we enhance data analytics, data analysis, and not only in a way that we have seen, but that all the levels, all the different levels are seeing, and finding consensus along the way. Another way of this is the tools. So, okay, translating all this data to the tools, and how can we assess those changing conditions now and into the future? A lot of that faces not only, I would say, computational power, capacity, but a little bit of what you were saying too about what are the traditional approaches, what are the new approaches, do we have pathways, or do we have approaches that perhaps are not the most traditional ones, but that will allow us to perhaps operate in the higher, lower, intermediate levels, different resolutions, and integrating those processes without having to fully model the entire system and all the operations. That's a barrier that we see. Like, yes, we need improved forecasts, we need better decisions, but we also need ways that we can accelerate somehow the decision process, building upon some consensus. And for me, this is tool and data, and finding the way that we can merge all of this together as well. And finally, yes, other processes to enhance planning, to listen, to understand community needs, to understand local needs, to enhance collaboration, coordination as a whole in the region. I see a lot of that in the newer generation, like willingness to be open to new processes, to new data analysis, to community engagement, to understanding all those aspects as a whole. And yes, we are transitioning towards a more established workforce that were less using or applying those more modern techniques, but at the same time, we still face barriers in the path that we can validate decisions, that we can validate processes as we advance those more innovative tools.
Any other comments from the panel on that question?
If I could just add to that, I think one of the speakers earlier was talking about this, the importance of humans and technology. But I'd like to say, I think all our people, all our organisations innovate every day. So our opportunities, how do we capture that innovation? How do we share it? How do we transfer it? Coupled with the use of technology. We talked about data, analytics, etc. But also I think as organisations, our employment models will have to evolve and change, whether it's around more contingent workforce, whether it's creating partnerships. So how do we get access to the talent we need to deliver outcomes for our communities, and the right talent at the right time to deal with the appropriate challenge, and then how do we accelerate digital transformation that we're all talking about, not only for assets but across businesses, to drive that efficiency, to drive that consistency, and also to drive that knowledge transfer and velocity.
You know, I have to acknowledge the fact that we've come through a pandemic, in some ways still in it. That's going to change the future and our business model forever. I don't know if I can count on getting my engineers back into our office at any time in the near future. They have proven to me that they can work remotely, that they can be productive, that they can excel. And in fact, if I don't allow that type of behavior, they're going to move on to some other firm, maybe one of your firms out there that do allow that. So that's one thing. I think I also want to talk about leadership. I have to work every day to convince some of the older workers that they're making positive change beyond maintaining and operating the treatment plants and the water supply plants. Our board of directors, as an example, back in 2008, said that we want you to become carbon-free by 2015. It was board direction translated down to us to where now we had to invest in geothermal, solar, wind. We became carbon-free in 2015. We did it. So leadership at the governance level is imperative, and rewarding good outcomes, highlighting success stories, which I think we have to do a much better job of. I heard a number of them over the last couple of days. We have to articulate those and hold those up as examples of what we're striving for. Find the best, highlight those, reward them, incentivize them. The one thing I will just say, one of the things beyond our governance model is also the fact that we're not tied to the Bay Delta system in California. So we're a high reward, low risk proposition in that The Russian River system is not snow dependent. It's not tied to the California large aqueduct system. So if we make an investment and we succeed, we will replicate the world out of it. That's something I love to do. But the reverse is also true, that if we come up with something that doesn't work, we shut it down, and we haven't risked the entire state of California's water supply system on a notion of innovation. Not everything works. You know that, all of you know that. We're looking at what does and trying to reward and replicate that, and not repeat lessons that have been learned. You want to take those in efficiently and effectively. So we got to do a much better job of messaging. The earlier comments today, having media, that came out yesterday quite a bit. We've got to communicate better. We've got to come up with success strategies and promote them. Without that, we're not going to be successful.
Just wanted to add what you were saying. What we have seen, the biggest barrier, or if you want to promote innovation, we need to understand the sense of urgency within utilities or in the communities. Oftentimes the sense of urgency is probably too late or regulatory driven, but once we understand or create that sense of urgency, sense of need, necessity, the COVID was a classic example, or new droughts or flood, some hurricane, right? So those are some of the things that usually create the sense of urgency for people to realize that we are at the brink of failure. We need to not operate this way. We need to have a different business model. But hopefully, we get to a situation, we learn from our previous mistakes and past experiences. We can use that as a method to, we don't want to be in that sense of urgency situation. How can we be in a better situation if that were to be happening tomorrow? It goes back to the risk and resiliency, but as an industry, we're not used to thinking that way, right? We're always used to following the status quo. So as utilities at the leadership level, as you were saying, they need to think about, okay, if we were to have an innovative business model, how can we make that happen within the utility? We need to give people time and resources. There's only so much time. If we don't have those things, if you don't have people to think from, I don't want to be in this situation, like 2 months back when I was hit with that. But it requires a lot of commitment from the leadership to have the workforce to think like that. So we need to focus on innovating, having a different business model as an utility, no longer just a service provider, but more from a business, right? Like a corporation, for lack of a better term. But that has to happen. If that starts to happen and at the leadership level, then we will start to see some changes happening. It won't be right away, but at least we'll be in the right track.
Thank you all. So one of the things that we've talked about over the course of the last 2 days is the importance of data. And Carolina, you talked about the different levels of data that you need for decision making. I think if we're going to really push and advance the concept of Smart One Water, we need to really find some areas where there are some high payoffs that we can demonstrate and apply data in smart ways to facilitate decision making. So I'd like to get your thoughts on where some of those possible areas for some pretty significant payoffs might be, where we might focus on that question, the use of data and innovative technology.
So in our pre-planning discussions for this panel today here, we talk about one project that I think is a great example. In our plan, in the district resiliency plan, we have one project that we call self-preservation. It is basically relying upon forecasts. We don't have reservoirs in the same level that we have in the western portions of the US, but we do have a system and we have the same mission of maintaining water levels high and not making any unnecessary release. So this project is really giving us the capacity to operate the system more efficiently based on better forecast, based on remote capability to operate the system, enhance remote capability, and really optimization of the operations. So the data we need, the types of data we need is again the same that we are having, just with more precision, and we are making important steps to advance. So real-time forecasts, understanding where we're going to have a major storm coming, when we really need the areas that will be mostly impacted. So we really release only water from the system where we need. And we can optimize operations so we don't need to be sending people to the team to open gate, close gates, to ensure that this system will be functional during major storms. And really avoiding linking back to the energy water nexus. So the way we operate the system more efficiently, the more energy we're going to be saving. We are one of the largest energy consumers in the state, so we have a mission to understand how we can optimize. So this is one of the projects that I can think out of my mind on where we need more data, where we need capacity to communicate, to connect our system with the power system, with the mechanical electronic components that we have in all those gates, and understanding how can we improve forecast and make not anything that would be not efficient in the way we operate the system.
Yeah. How many of us have heard the saying that how do you save money, right? By not spending, right? We can apply the same philosophy for utilities too. Since you asked about the quicker wave of benefits, I go back to one of the examples on what we did for City of Atlanta. They have a consent order program. As part of the consent decree program, you are, as anyone who had worked on consent decree programs, you know how long they are. It's over 10 years. You're working on a lot of assessments and eventually come up with a lot of great infrastructure to handle sewer overflows, or either combined sewer or sanitary sewer overflows. So if you can save millions of dollars by not investing in those capital projects, then you have essentially saved money and use it for better uses for operations or for other capital projects. So we helped City of Atlanta with a capital investment optimization plan that helped save over $600 million in the next 12 to 15 years, I guess, avoiding some of the capital investments. And that was based on a predictive maintenance little pilot project that was completed for the city. Originally, the hydraulic models assumed that there were going to be specific overflows in certain locations because of capacity limitations. But based on this little pilot project, we were able to better understand what the system dynamics are going to be. So using that as a justification, we were able to negotiate a better deal with the EPA and not have those capital investments that are hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's just one example. And there are, I can keep talking about several examples. Other one would be real-time optimization of the sewer systems. We have to look at the business case evaluation of what that means and what are we trying to save here. Is it the cost? Maybe there's the cost of cleanup involved. That's a lot more compared to the investments that we need to make. Once we have a better understanding of the business cases for each of these technology projects, then we'll have a better understanding of where we can invest, even from investing in the technology projects perspective.
I know we're coming up on time, but I do have one final question for the panel, and this hopefully begins to set up some of our discussion in the breakout session later today. But one of the challenges that we always face, especially when we're talking about resilience, is we're talking about making investments and decisions today that may not really yield a benefit for a decade or more into the future. So I want to get your thoughts very briefly on how we can quantify the benefits when we're looking at those long-term returns. Jim?
We always think of risk, whether it's around likelihood or impact. So I think in terms of quantifying the investments, the narrative around the broader economic costs and the trade-offs, decisions we make, but also it's not just about cost. Benefits our communities are expecting multiple benefits. So whether it's about benefits of natural environment, communities, workforce, etc. So being transparent that it's a balanced scorecard, and that the benefits vary, but also acknowledging that we've benefited from investments that previous generations have made in terms of infrastructure, and we, as custodians today, as I said, owe it to the future generations.
The last few minutes I have, I want to harken back to acknowledge that academic and businesses need to work with local utilities that are capable of platforming and demonstrating quickly the type of solutions that we're dealing with. One example we have an MOU with Scripps Institute for Oceanography down in San Diego, California. They are really doing some precipitation forecasting that's unparalleled. It's setting up the basis for our atmospheric river research program and our ability. So when you say how to measure that, it's we started at Lake Mendocino, which is our smaller reservoir up north of Sonoma, back in 2012. So it's taken almost a decade for us to get here, but we were able to save 11,000 acre-feet of water during a year in which we were entering into drought. I can only imagine, had we not been looking 10 years out or plus, what we would have gone into this last year without that. So that said, we've consciously designed our programs to be replicable. We wanted to find others to come along. So Sonoma County started working with Scripps. We ended up with the forecast informed reservoir, which is Lake Mendocino. We're going to go to Lake Sonoma next, but we also helped the Yuba River system, the big engine for California's water supply. Orange County Water District took on the next iteration. So you have there's a need for replication, design, and highlighting projects that work, and have a learning institution that has a feedback loop and lets us replicate the stuff that works, work with key partners. And I would think that's the way 11,000 acre feet, I sell 40,000 acre feet in an entire year. That's a quarter of my water supply based off a 10-year decision. But the last thing I'll say is also I'm hearing a common theme about collaboration, coordination at a regional level. It's not an easy thing to do. It's much more difficult than people realize, but the payoffs are immense. So incentivizing regional collaboration and innovation at some level is going to be a key.
I wanted to add just quickly, I know we're running out of time, but we talk a lot about data and forecasts, but all of that needs to be part of validated models, robust models. And we don't have full capacity yet to evaluate risks, compound risks, utilizing like coastal inland models, and really accelerating the process of getting to the solutions, running those scenarios with resolutions that perhaps we can read at the regional level and also at the local level. This is definitely an area that we need innovation, that we need more computer power, that we need tools that would allow us to collaborate, and not only that, but identify the benefits. It's through those models, the applications of those models, that we see vulnerabilities, that we see areas where we might see, for instance, in a flood case, inundation, that we can then model solutions and prevent and understand really the benefits to the society, to the environment, and all of those areas that perhaps will be impacted by increasing risks. So as a modeler, as a water engineer, I really think the tools, the models, and investment in that is critical for the assessment of the whole resiliency needs.
Thank you. I want to thank our panelists this morning. I hope many of you will join us this afternoon in the breakout session at 4:30.